So I turn, and it gives me the opportunity to reconnect with somebody I have total respect for. His name is Jonathan Williams.
It's great to be back with you, my friend.
Absolutely. Gosh, we were together.
I couldn't hear your voice.
We were together a lot of years, so it's nice to reconnect. Okay, so Jonathan Williams was always in 10, 20 years, the economist for the American Legislative Exchange Council. And then when we talked minutes ago, he is also now the president and chief economist. So let's start at the beginning. In 30, 60 seconds, what should a first-time listener know about Jonathan Williams?
Well, I've been at ALEC now for 18 years, and it's a great pleasure to work with state legislators and business leaders across the country to talk about really the quintessential American principles of free markets, limited government, federalism. Those are the things that we work with, but also work really a ton these days on Capitol Hill and with the White House in helping to pursue their federalism agenda and push ideas and power back to the states and get it out of Washington, D.C.
And for a first-time listener, I introduced you as ALEC as a center-right government policy organization. Clean that up. What should people know about ALEC?
Well, we're really the nation's largest nonpartisan individual membership organization of state legislators, and we also bring in members of the private sector to discuss principled policy ideas and solutions for many of the major policy questions that face every single state. We're true believers in this idea of states being the 50 laboratories of democracy, and that so many of our nation's issues can be solved and should be solved not in Washington but at the state level.
In the last 9 months, you went from chief economist to chief economist and president with a big smile because I like you as a person. Tell the audience you're collecting 2 paychecks these days.
The biggest paycheck I collect is the idea that we can see big positive things changing at the state level. And
there you go.
That's just incredible to be a part of it.
All right. Federalism. Let's see. It's in the eye of the beholder. Federalism. Define it as you see it.
Well, federalism, of course, is a really uniquely American thing. And here we are getting ready to celebrate America at 250 years of this grand experiment. And as what I just did is go back and reread the Declaration of Independence after it had been a little while. I encourage everybody to do the same thing. And one of the things you realize, of course, is so many of the grievances that our founding fathers had was with central government planning. In that case, very central government with one individual, the King of England, making so many of the decisions in their lives. When they set out to create the Constitution a number of years later, they wanted to have this idea of check and balance within government. And the idea of both vertical and horizontal federalism is to really protect the individual liberties that were set out in that incredible document. It's been pretty unique in the course of world history to see government, of course, empowering individuals the way that our system of government does. And one of the important checks and balances on that is that government should not be concentrated simply in Washington. But their idea, of course, was to everything not explicitly given to the federal government ought to be reserved for the states and for the people. And that's, of course, enshrined in the 10th Amendment to our Constitution in the Bill of Rights. And so that's, I think, a proper understanding of federalism. Of course, there's lots of debates between local level of government and state level of government as well. But when you think of it, as Ronald Reagan said, the great Ronald Reagan, that it wasn't Washington that created the states, it was the states that created the federal government.
Well done. Well done. All right. You're this huge, prestigious organization. You do an annual publication called Rich States, Poor States. For a first-time listener, 8th grade class, big picture. Tell us about Rich States, Poor States.
Well, the Cliff Notes version, Dace, of Rich States, Poor States, and I've been working on it since really my day one project at ALEC when I joined the organization. Art Laffer, the great economist and Ronald Reagan's economic advisor, Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient under President Trump, and Stephen Moore, then at the Wall Street Journal, now running his own organization, great friends, wanted to come up with this idea that state legislators, of course we know, playing off this idea of the laboratories of democracy, giving them a way to measure that concept of competitive federalism, that states immediately are in competition with each other, whether they like it or not, in a range of issues. And what we do in Rich States, Poor States is try to provide a great barometer for our legislators, for business leaders, and for the general public to see how their state stacks up in an array of categories that we think matter the most for economic success. And there's lots of great stories that have developed over these 18 years that I know we can get into. But the basic premise of Rich States, Poor States is Peter Drucker, the great management mind in America, would say is things that you measure get better. And so why not have a great tool for states to benchmark and measure their policies versus the other 49 states?
You make my heart purr. Peter Drucker, mega fan. As he often said, every time I walk by a business, I think there is a courageous person. Peter Drucker, wow. All right, my friend, I digress. On your side, as much bravado as I can put on the radio, drum roll, garbage can lids, whatever. How does Delaware rank?
Well, there's going to be some probably unsurprised folks listening to this to know that Delaware is not in the top 10 of Rich States, Poor States for economic outlook. And there's some concerning signs out there. But at the economic outlook rank this year for Delaware in the 2025 edition of Rich States, Poor States is 38 in the nation. And, of course, we can unpack what that means, but that's 15 equally weighted factors that go into that ranking. Things like tax rates, state-level debt, regulation, labor policy, and lots of reasons why we chose those 15, because in theory, Dace, we could choose 1,000 different variables probably to choose from. But Art Laffer has kept these 15 pretty consistent over now 50 years that he's analyzed the states, and we've been at it, of course, 18. And we think that they matter for a couple of reasons. Is first, based on just the academic research and Art Laffer's experiences, we think that these 15 really do drive population growth, job growth, and overall economic health of the state. When a state gets it right, we see so many of the positive things that are happening to these in-migration states like Florida, Texas, Tennessee, many of the states that we talk about at the top of the ranking, and then states like New York and California, Illinois, Maryland. We know that story, unfortunately, all too well. And so when we look at that's an important element of it, but another piece of it, and this is probably just as important, Dace, is we're seeing all these different great ranking systems out there because people love to see how their state stacks up. Our ranking focuses in Rich States, Poor States on the ideas that state lawmakers in Dover and the other 49 state capitals can directly control versus so many of these other things that get measured that legislators only dream of controlling, such as weather and other things that would be great to warm it up a little bit in the winter, but really obviously not in the control of most state legislators that I've seen.
And to play fair, probably worthy to mention, it's straightforward and common sense. But if you're a business, especially a big employer, you're going to look at Cato, ALEC, Tax Foundation before you do absolutely everything. And by the way, if you don't follow it, Cato has Delaware with an F. You're our guest today, and you rank us 38th. Give us 1 to 3 paragraphs on the good things that you see about Delaware and 1 to 3 on the bad things to get to that 38th ranking.
Well, starting with the positive, not having a state-level death tax, an important element. So many of the other states in the Northeast have state-level estate or inheritance taxes, and we find that's a major driver of individuals, especially after retirement, moving to warmer states anyways, and that being one more reason why. So Delaware avoiding that's a very good thing. Obviously, the long-standing history of Delaware's avoidance of a sales tax, that's a positive in that element, but it does come back to bite Delaware in the other side of that, where you squeeze the balloon on one side, the pressure means that it obviously expands on the other, and that is where the income tax system ranks, and that's really one of the biggest negatives that we find in Rich States, Poor States for Delaware, whether it's the business income tax rate or the personal income tax rate, some of the highest 10, both of those categories in the country when you add state and local together and do an apples-to-apples comparison. And all taxes matter, Dace, but our research has shown personal and business income taxes are some of the most damaging ways that states go about raising the revenue to fund core government services.
One more follow-up, and then we're going to run out of time here, but one more follow-up. You're king for the day, governor for the day of the state of Delaware in 30, 60 seconds. What do you do to give us a better ranking?
Well, I think you got to address the income tax issue, but how do you do that? You address it through you needing to watch the overspending problem that you and I have talked about many times over the years, and putting really government spending on a diet through a solid limit to the way that government grows. We've seen this work in red and blue states alike, and that's really the heart of the matter. You cannot spend without having to pay for it on the other side in a balanced budget environment.
All right. Tick-tock on the clock, not our friend. You had shared with me the Trump administration very much welcomes your ideas and that you've been very much involved. Share that story with the audience. Fascinating.
Well, it was an incredible experience where we at ALEC were asked to be a part of a roundtable with 5 governors and just a handful of other individuals. Is the first event that President Trump had during National School Choice Week in January, and had a chance where I thought I would spend maybe 5 minutes with the president and have a good chance to talk with these governors like Governor Youngkin and Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders about what they're pursuing with education freedom and parental rights and the movement that's sweeping the nation right now. But President Trump was so ingrained by the discussion, and the NAEP scores, the National Progress Scores, essentially on standardized testing, had just come out the day before, and those scores were horrifying to all of us. And the president was very interested in how do we reverse these trends. And so he stayed through lunch and through another hour with us in the Oval Office, gave us a tour of the Oval Office, and it was an incredible experience. But for me, more important than any of that was it showed his commitment to the idea of improving education outcomes in the country. And just a number of weeks later, of course, he issued the executive order to bring education out of the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. and shift it where it all should have been, at the state level, at the local level, and ultimately at the parental level. And that, to me, is one of the most exciting policy fights that we're in the midst of right now. And we're seeing now, 17 states become universal education freedom states where the dollars are following the parents and the children. And for me, that is an incredible, incredible opportunity, and maybe one of the biggest achievements that I've seen in my 20-year career so far.
You get one last question. We're going to run out of time. This isn't hypothetical. This is real. New governor in the state of Delaware, Myers, at least proposed higher taxes. It got shot down by the Dover legislators. Delaware has one industry. It's called corporate governance. That is at least in limbo right now. We'll find out as the months proceed. Real estate assessment is going cuckoo crazy in the state, hypothetical to a bottom line. What do you think that those ugly ingredients do to that hypothetically 38th ranking?
Well, I think you are staring down the barrel of a very real scenario that Delaware could be a bottom 10 state for economic outlook very quickly. And it's not just because of those very bad ideas that you just mentioned. It's because all the other states are moving in a very good direction. The vast majority of states are looking to cut taxes right now. And in this kind of competitive environment, Dace, you can fall behind simply by standing still, let alone making many of those unforced policy errors that you just mentioned.
His name is Jonathan Williams, and I enjoy saying this, President and Chief Economist of the American Legislative Exchange Council.